Hi, welcome back to another episode of Mine EX-Plorers, where we talk about all things mining in our weird ass relationship.
Yes, indeed.
Just kidding. We're not talking about that today. Today, we are going to talk about tariffs and how they affect the mining industry. Now, Stuart has a pretty good handle on all things mining and keeping up to date on the trends, so I kind of want to pick his brain today instead of him just attacking me with questions. If you haven't met Blue, this is Blue, my cat. He hasn't seen me for a minute, so he will be joining me on this episode and keep my lap warm.
Blue loves Crystal. He doesn't really love anyone else. He just loves Crystal.
He's a one mama cat. It's fine.
He'll let me pet him occasionally. And if she's gone for more than a week or so, he will come sit in my lap for a minute, and he'll let me pet him 2 or 3 times. And then he'll just sit in my lap, and he won't let me move him. And if I try to move him, he'll bite me. And if I try to pet him, he'll bite me. But he just wants to sit there. But he'll let her do whatever.
Well, I'm his mama, but...
All right, let's jump in. I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me, Crystal.
Yeah, thank you for making time in your busy schedule to talk with me about tariffs today.
Yeah, and it's a very fluid, dynamic subject, and it's changing by the day.
It is changing by the day, which makes it interesting because we've just seen over the last couple of days that the Trump administration put tariffs on Canada and Mexico, but then they put a pause on it with Canada and Mexico participating. So it's just a very ever-changing dynamic. So what I'm curious to talk about today is tariffs on China and China materials, and more specifically on critical minerals and how that could potentially affect us in the United States. So I would love to hear your overview of just explaining, like, what is a tariff?
Yeah, so tariffs, it's a very dynamic situation, and it's something that Trump loves. He talks a lot about tariffs.
It is his favorite word.
He has said it's his favorite word. So there's a lot going on there. And like I talked about in the first episode, I think there's a lot of saber rattling going on, particularly with Mexico and Canada. And they've immediately come to the table with some concessions. They've both decided to deploy troops to the border, the northern border and the southern border of the United States, in order to delay those tariffs a month, which gives some wiggle room, some negotiating room. I think there'll be some effects there on mining, and I'd like to dig into that a little more, but I think China is actually a lot more of an interesting situation and something that deserves a little more thought, particularly for mining and metals. And here we go. Now I have my own cat. So it's a 2-cat interview now. We've upgraded to 2 cats.
Everyone meets Skaboosh.
This is Skaboosh. He's not a tariff. He is a kitty. Skaboosh is our oldest cat. We got him in 2009. And so he is our older gentleman here. He's just a couple years older than Blue, and very different personality. He's the friendly cat.
His original name was Sweetheart because he was such a nice cat. And he is still a nice cat.
We call him the Skaboosh, and he's a very nice cat. He's very laid back and easygoing, and also quite curious.
And demanding when it's snack time or breakfast time.
Pepper Dog is not here today, so the cats are taking advantage, and they are here to hang out. So, tariffs. What is a tariff? A tariff is a levy that a company places on goods that enter the country. So the idea behind a tariff is a way to level the playing field. Mm-hmm. So if your country makes, say, washing machines, and you're importing washing machines from another country, if you create a tariff that makes the washing machines that are imported more expensive, it makes the domestic washing machines more attractive and kind of levels the playing field. That's the idea. That's what they're supposed to be used for, and historically have been used for. It's also a way for governments to collect a lot of income. Potentially, there's talks that if there was a blanket 10% tariff on all goods imported in the United States, it would generate hundreds of $billions a year in revenue. Which wouldn't completely replace revenue from say, income taxes, but it would take a big dent out of it. But there's so many other complications and shifting things that happen with that, and a lot of downstream, secondary, tertiary effects and upstream effects that happen with tariffs. But at their base, a tariff is a way to level the playing field economically and
Right.
make domestic products more attractive to foreign counterparts, where they're made cheaper with less restriction, and particularly from an environmental lens, it's kind of an interesting tool to encourage domestic production of things that may be produced without the best practices in other countries. Like when we talk about critical minerals, there could be things like child labor and lots of domestic environmental issues that happen with minerals imported.
Right, exactly. Okay. So how do you feel that if we were to put tariffs on China, how is that going to affect the domestic supply of minerals?
Yeah, so China is largely a consumer of raw materials, and then they produce goods, downstream goods from those materials.
And why is China a large consumer?
So they're a large consumer of raw materials because, one, their economy is growing very rapidly. They're expanding their middle class at a very rapid level, like a lot of the BRICS countries. So you've heard of BRICS. So Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. So those are the BRICS countries. And then there's BRICS Plus, and there's other countries that would like to be involved in that and are in a similar economic basket. But China is growing rapidly. They're building a middle class. So they're consuming a lot of raw materials, copper, lumber, oil, energy, coal, all these things. But then they also consume a lot of critical minerals that they refine into things like batteries for EVs. And they build, lithium batteries of all sorts for all sorts of devices,
Yes.
cell phones, drones, you name it. So they're consuming a lot of raw materials. So when we put tariffs on goods from China, there's an incredible amount of imported materials from China, finished goods. And so even just a 10% tariff on all goods from China is a massive amount of goods that are being tariffed, and it brings in a lot of revenue, but it also hampers some of that raw material input. So you've got China slowing down consumption, so it can actually affect mineral prices in a number of different ways, and supply and demand. But the key thing is China consumes a lot of these key minerals, and then they turn them into other key components that they have a lot of control over, restricting how those things are exported. And then there are other minerals, tungsten, molybdenum, gallium, things like that they're putting export controls on that are used in key industries outside of China, where it's not just China taking raw materials and making goods. China's actually exporting these minerals as well, and they have a lot of leverage.
Absolutely.
I feel like in these trade wars, and it may be a little early to call them trade wars. It may be very quick. With Canada and Mexico, they may already be over. Time will tell. Things are changing quickly, but I don't see a lot of concern there for the mining and metals industries. Although we'll get into that a little bit later when we talk about gold price and services and things.
Right.
But with China has a lot of leverage.
Yes.
There's a lot of leverage there, and China is not afraid to play the long game. They see things a lot further ahead. In Western politics, it's always about the next election cycle. In Western corporations, it's all about the next quarter and quarterly results.
Yes.
In China, it's about 50-year plans, 100-year plans. It's very long term. They're not thinking about short term, they're thinking about long term things. And so they're willing to do a lot of things like shift. China was involved a lot in stock markets and building algorithms and things to trade, and they were involved in crypto and things like that. And now there's a very concerted effort to redeploy a lot of those minds that were on that cutting edge stuff into AI, into other things. And so we're seeing things like DeepSeek come out, where there's this large language learning model that is way cheaper to deploy. It learns fast. It can be deployed much more cheaply with a lot less energy consumption. And it's really changing the game. And so I see China being a much more volatile situation due to all that leverage.
Volatile in what regards? Can you expand upon that?
So there's key minerals that they control so much of that if they just stopped exporting them, there's no other source.
Right. Well,
that's
or
developed.
it's not necessarily about the source, it's about the processing. Like rare earths is a great example of that.
Right.
We have one of the only rare earth mines in North America, just right over across the Nevada border in California. Mountain Pass Mine, right. I think right now they're working on processing their material, but right now they can only refine it to a certain point, and then they have to ship that to China, which puts the control back in China's hands. And then we have the raw material, but if we can't process it here, then it really doesn't do us any good.
Right, exactly. Yeah, and that's the thing is they control the production of a lot of rare earths, the raw material, but they control a huge amount of the refining capacity.
Yeah.
And for a lot of minerals, they control 100% of it.
Right.
And so they can decide not to export certain things, and they can control huge swaths of the market, especially the key tech markets. They really have a lot of control over. And there's a lot of minerals that don't have a huge market, and the economics haven't supported developing them anywhere else, just in China, but they're so critical that and that's part of the reason. And it's Trump knows all this, a lot of it, and so when he came out of the gate with a 10% tariff, that was he really doesn't want to piss him off too bad, but he knows he's not going to get concessions immediately, and there's going to be a lot of tit for tat there.
So you think it's kind of he's like sending a message to China in a way?
Yeah, and none of it's really a surprise. I mean, as soon as he won the election, they knew it was coming, and it's the same with Canada and Mexico. I mean, these moves are anticipated, and so it's not a huge surprise, but also things can escalate very quickly, and there is definitely danger of things getting out of hand, which I think for us being in the base of the pyramid and the industry that goes out and explores for and discovers these mineral deposits and then helps mine them, we could see things change really quickly.
Right.
A lot of wild ups and downs in commodity prices. Tungsten, for example, there are very limited ability to bring tungsten online in the United States.
Yeah, that would be a long process.
There are a lot of mines and deposits that were mined historically, but there's almost nothing that's ready to go on any sort of a scale.
Right. I mean, do we even have a place to refine it?
No.
Right. So we could.
No, not that I'm aware of. No.
Right. So we could potentially mine it in 10 to 20 years, but then once it's mined, it still has to be exported.
Right. And it's a very, very key component for hardening steel and a bunch of other uses that if it disappeared from the market, there'd be a lot of problems.
Right. Right. So it's kind of, it's crazy to think about, like, because we can source most of these materials that China has decided to ban or like slow on exports, right? Like, what am I thinking of? Antimony, for example.
Right.
Right. That's coming back into the conversation. We know we have deposits here in the U.S.
Yep.
But it's all about the refining process. It's all about getting that end product that you can use. And if we don't have a way to refine it, then what good is the raw material going to do us?
Right. And a lot of these minerals are not refined here because they're not consumed in enough quantity.
Right.
'Cause
It's
a lot
not
of the downstream
economical.
industries have left. And then there's also a lot of complexity, but then there's the environmental factor.
Right.
So a lot of these really complex processes involve a lot of chemicals and a lot of supply chain and a lot of shipping different chemicals and a lot of upstream and downstream processes that involve a lot of, need careful environmental consideration. And so they're happening in other places where it's not as strict. And so being able to bring all that back and do it all the right way is going to be really expensive. And then in typical fashion, what we'll see is something like antimony. Okay, there's export controls on antimony. All right, well, we have antimony resources in the United States. Antimony is associated with lots of gold deposits. So Liberty Gold, one of my favorite companies that I like to follow, announced that they have a significant, potential antimony resource here in Utah, down on Antimony Ridge next to the Gold Strike deposit. They've known it was there all along. They just had to go back and remine through their records to see where it's at and go do some sampling and drilling. And then there's, of course, antimony up at the Stibnite project in Idaho, which has, is much further along in development. But then again, there's the refining. So if the prices get high enough, those projects progress, they get closer to mining, they get government assistance. And China knows all this. They're public companies. They make announcements. The funding's public. They know about all of it.
Right.
And then as soon as they get close to production or they're in production, all they have to do is release the capital controls. The market gets flooded again. Prices drop. They go out of business. And then they can just rinse and repeat. So, and when you have two countries who are competing and they have such different governing practices, like China being a single party state and having very little checks and balances in terms of like national priorities. They decide they have a priority, they have it. They can sacrifice big swaths of their economy for the greater good or something like that in a trade war, whereas in the United States, that's not possible.
Right. We have those checks and balances.
Right. And in a capitalist system where if the prices don't support the development, then without massive amounts of government subsidy, it doesn't work. Where China, they can operate a mine for 20 years with no profit. And if it's part of a larger strategy, that's fine.
Right.
So it makes it a very dynamic, difficult adversary in something like a trade war. And that's why, that's where I'm really looking is, there's interesting things that can happen with Canada and Mexico. And we certainly work together on a lot of mining projects, a lot of natural resource sharing back and forth. But ultimately, China and China's sphere of influence with the resources they control, because China doesn't just control resources in China. They control huge swaths of Africa, and they control the resources, and they've used a lot of creative means and interesting and questionable means in some cases to gain control of all of these resources in Africa as well. And so their sphere of influence extends a lot further than just China.
No, absolutely. I mean, just thinking about China production of the export controls they're putting on the tungsten, beryllium, bismuth, and molybdenum. China controls 42% of the world's production of molybdenum. Molybdenum, tellurium.
Yeah, interesting basket of minerals to pronounce.
Right. Whereas the U.S. only has 12% of that.
Yeah, and we actually make it here. There is a moly plant out here at the Bingham Canyon pit as well. I'm not sure if it's currently active, but there are some domestic sources of it, so they don't control all of it, but they definitely have.
But they definitely have the lion's share.
Is massive, yes.
Yeah, I mean, and there's some minerals that they're putting export controls on that we don't even, like bismuth. We haven't mined that since 1997.
Right.
So where do you see, thinking big picture here, how do you see how do you see this affecting the junior mining exploration dynamic? Do you think that will putting a ban on, the 10% ban on Chinese tariffs will help the junior miners explore here in the United States, or do you think that's going to just take some time to push exploration here? Where do you see that going?
I see it as being short term. I see it as being positive for juniors.
Really?
I see it as positive for mineral exploration. I'm seeing early stages with just our companies that there's more interest in having domestic projects right now in the United States. I think there's going to be a little bit of a scramble to get a foothold here in some strategic minerals. And ultimately, the junior market on the grassroots level is driven by whatever they can raise capital for.
Right.
And a lot of that capital raising is revolves around being able to tell a good story, right? You sell the story. You sell the story at the grassroots level. And then as a progress develops, the story is replaced more and more with facts and discoveries, and it's replaced with actual knowledge. But early grassroots stuff, you're selling a story, and good, bad, or indifferent, the tariffs create potential to tell a story in a lot of different ways. Well, if this happens and this happens, it's going to be really positive for this, so we need to position now and raise capital and secure a project for antimony in the United States.
Right.
Or China and the United States may get into a big trade war, and China may put export controls, or they may put restrictions on lithium batteries and lithium refining and lithium processing, which they control a big chunk of as well. And so you could see people, okay, well, the story in lithium over the last year and a half has been not great for juniors. They're struggling, they're dropping projects, they don't have the budgets they had. But something like that, you could see there being a narrative woven around, well, if this continues to escalate, then having lithium deposits in friendly jurisdictions is going to be key. So I think overall it's going to be positive. There are going to be some commodities that'll see negatives. There's been a very big tailwind for copper around electrification.
Right.
So everyone's talking about, okay, we need to electrify. The grid needs huge upgrades to support charging cars. We need to build EVs. We're doing electric buses. We're doing electric mining haul trucks. We're doing electric now. Big tailwind for copper. Well, who consumes most of the copper right now?
China.
So a hot and escalating trade war will limit that demand. So you could see tailwinds turn into headwinds. You could see tailwinds decreasing because this big driving electrification is also occurring in China. And if China gets affected by a trade war, it's going to slow those kinds of things down. So there's definitely negatives that will happen and can happen. And so across the board, you really have to look at every commodity specifically and say, okay, what does this mean for coal? What does this mean for iron ore? What does this mean for copper? What does this mean for gold?
Right.
What does this mean for silver? And I think we can focus on some of the key ones. Specifically, the critical minerals that export controls are happening on and that are being banned. There's not huge repercussions right now. But
they could come.
And it's enough to get people looking. So they're looking.
Right.
They're going, okay, people are looking around for antimony again. They're digging through their records and going, oh, hey, we never, we drilled this gold deposit and we built up a really sizable resource, but we haven't been assaying for antimony and we haven't really looked at it. Let's go back through and see if maybe we have an antimony resource, or maybe if prices support it, is there a way we can go back through and, build a circuit to process it? Or,
Right.
Is there ways different mining companies can work together and start building some refining capacity?
Yeah, I mean, a lot could change. I mean, we'll see.
Yep.
We will see. So I've noticed that gold's been at an all-time high recently, and it has been. It seems like every day it's all-time high. But, and I would love to hear your perspective on this. I haven't seen much change in the junior mining market, junior exploration market. What are your thoughts on that?
So, gold's hitting all-time highs right now, and the tariffs are definitely driving some of that. Because tariffs and tariff fears, because tariffs are inflationary.
Mm-hmm.
Tariffs are inflationary. They drive inflation. So that's a driver of gold price. The dollar and other currencies that gold's priced in can be devalued in a trade war. And then there's a big
I'm getting
push.
yelled at by the cat.
Blue doesn't like talking about gold. There's a big push right now to move a lot of gold reserves to the United States. And so there's a big demand to move gold from different countries into the U.S. ahead of...
What do you mean by that? Move gold?
Physical gold is being relocated to the United States.
Like Fort Knox.
Well, not exactly Fort Knox, but other commercial storage locations.
Really?
Yeah, there's a big push right now because if you get it in ahead of any tariffs and it's here, then you don't have to pay a tariff on it when you move it here.
So then you're insulating yourself from the potential extra tax that you might have to pay.
So there's a big push right now to relocate a lot of physical gold to the United States.
Interesting.
And that's creating constraints in the physical gold market, which there have been for a long time, and we could have a whole episode on that. But the constraints in the physical market are overflowing into the paper market, which is where, like, for every physical ounce of gold, 1,000 ounces of paper gold are traded.
Right.
So there's such a pinch in the physical demand market right now, people wanting to buy gold and reshore gold here into the United States, that it's overflowing to the paper market. And that paired with inflationary fears and real inflation is causing the price to hit all-time highs. But it's been baked in for a long time. If you look at charts and you look at long-term fundamentals and things, like it was already, all the big banks, Goldman and everyone else was already predicting $3,000 an ounce gold by the end of this year, early next year anyway.
Yeah.
And so really this is just kind of accelerating it.
Okay.
That's the first part of it. When will we start to see that affect the miners? And I know there's a lot of people online and a lot of retail investors who are extremely frustrated because they've been beat up for years. Gold prices are the highest they've ever been, and all of the mining stocks are still kicking around near lows.
Right.
And in the junior market, they're like all-time lows.
Because from what we've experienced is the gold price drives exploration.
Right.
When gold's high, people are funding all kinds of projects. And it doesn't even have to be gold related.
Right.
But we're not seeing that right now.
No, we're not seeing it at all. We're seeing advanced projects continue to advance.
Yep.
We're seeing some junior projects that have, maybe they're not quite to PEA level, but they're starting to build a potential resource. We're seeing those continue to fund and move along, but grassroots excitement, staking claims for gold projects is really not happening yet. So what I think needs to happen is, so the majors right now are starting to do more partnerships, especially in strategic minerals and things like that. They're doing joint ventures. They're creating like the BHP Explorer program. And
Resolution's a great example of that.
Right. And there's companies that are partnering and they're working together and they're investing that way versus just acquiring juniors outright. But there will be some acquisitions. And what needs to happen, particularly to drive retail and institutions back in, institutions want to see retail kind of chasing in and they'll chase that back in, or vice versa. But some junior companies need to get bought at high multiples
to get excitement
to
again.
throw some blood in the water and get the sharks moving.
Yeah.
To get them excited.
Yeah.
We need to see some juniors sell at some good multiples. So there have been deals, but there hasn't been anything exciting.
Not recently, anyway.
Right. So we need to see some excitement, and then things will start moving. But I think it'll happen quickly once it happens. But you could see things just taper along. You could see the gold price continue to go up at a pretty steady trajectory, up to $3,000 an ounce and beyond over the next year. And then the miners, the majors will start reporting better quarterly results, higher profitability, which in turn, unless they spend it all on stock buybacks, which will also help bring their prices up. But if they take that money and they reinvest it in acquisitions and building their pipeline and buying juniors and buying quality projects, then it'll start to flow down. But we're not quite there yet. We're still too early. But I think once it starts to move, it'll move pretty quickly.
Yeah.
But we just need some big transactions. Need some juniors to be bought at some good multiples, some nice high multiples where
Get people
the
excited.
investors that get in get a good return, they get an exciting return. But right now, like as a retail investor, you're like, you read about, people bought this, meme coin and got 16,000% returns in 2 days. And it's like, why would they invest in mining where
It's hard to compete
best
with
case
that.
scenario, you might get a 20-30% return. Like silver stocks, for example, there's been some silver stocks that got a 200-300% return over the last couple of years, but most of them, 20-30%. It's not great. You might as well just buy an index fund.
Right.
Versus buying any particular juniors at this point. So
right. No, we've seen the struggles of trying to compete with tech in our own personal business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Just for talent and interest and all of that, but particularly for investors. And like we talked about before, those retail investors really drive, getting excited and then, getting into that narrative. They really drive the grassroots exploration.
Yeah, they're the start of the flywheel, really.
Right.
Once the juniors get excited, I mean, it's just it all flows from there.
Right. But, like we saw up in Vancouver at VRIC and Roundup, there's not a lot of exuberance, but there was a good solid backbone of positivity about the year and what's going on.
Right.
And a lot of great companies with great projects are kicking along. Then all the junk has kind of got flushed out of the system now, and it's pretty much all quality projects moving forward.
Good. Yeah, I mean, it's too expensive to have a bad project.
Right. Right.
And people can sniff it out pretty quickly nowadays.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I think those days are about gone. So now I think you're right. I think we'll see a lot more high quality projects moving forward.
This episode brought to you by 2 cats and Tariffs. I'd like to show you a video I made, taking a little break from the tariff talk and the gold prices talk. I'd like to show you a little video I made about construction aggregates.
Ooh, our favorite material.
Which will be the topic of next week's episode.
Stay tuned.
But I'd like to show you this video I made, and I haven't shown this to anyone yet, so you get to see it first.
That's exciting.
And I will show you and our audience at the same time. If you could just get that on your lap there and push the play button.
Yo, before the towers, before the streets, before the highways under our feet, there's a mix that makes it all complete. Sand, gravel, crushed stone, bring the heat. Every road, every bridge, every home we make ain't built without that aggregate cake. The flour in the mix, the base of the plan. Without these rocks, ain't nothing stand. We dig, we haul, we crush, we pave. Without this work, you're stuck in a cave. Bridges, tunnels, towers high, you need rock to touch the sky. Concrete, asphalt, brick and stone. Without these loads, you're on your own. No foundation, no expansion. You need rock, ain't no question. Yeah. They say money makes the world go round, but without crushed stone, it falls straight down. Airports, highways, skyscraper beams. Every project starts with these dream machines. Quarries keep the system alive, so the world keeps moving, we thrive, we drive. Supply chain strong, keep the trucks on track. You like progress, better thank the rock stacks. We dig, we haul, we crush.
These lyrics are great.
I'm glad you like it.
This work,
I love it. This is fun.
bridges, tunnels, towers high.
There's some real footage in here, right?
Oh yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah, and I actually licensed some from Shutterstock too to fill in. It's so bad at equipment, AI still, that I had to.
No, I like the real footage.
It ain't glamorous, but here's the truth. Without aggregates, you'd lose your roof. No roads, no homes, no cities that shine. It all starts in the rock supply line.
We're gonna have to do a karaoke episode where you sing these.
Yeah, that'd be fun.
Down the street,
You need to take some
across
singing
that bridge
lessons.
on your way to eat. Take a look at the world you see, and know it all starts with quarry concrete.
That's amazing. That was an awesome video. It's not every day that we get to have a music video around construction aggregates. So next time we'll do karaoke.
For the 100,000 people that work in the industry in the United States, it's about time they get their own theme song.
You know, they deserve it. They work hard, and like the video said, I mean, without construction aggregates, society would fall. So
It's true.
we need it.
It's the bedrock of everything.
We need it.
It's the flour in our economic cake.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to talking about construction aggregates. Next week, we're going to talk about MAGA, just so we're clear. Make aggregates great again.
Make aggregates great again.
We're not going to get political, but we are going to get nerdy on some rocks.
Okay.
Now, as we wrap up this episode, why don't you talk about your carbide lamp really quick and tell the viewers about what it is and how it used to work.
So, my show and tell today is a carbide lamp. Last week, Crystal showed off her awesome Sterex wax candles.
Old school.
And they went from Sterex wax candles to carbide lamps. And the way these work is the top is filled with water and the bottom is filled with calcium carbonate. And this calcium carbonate, when it is exposed to water, creates acetylene gas. And the acetylene gas builds up in the bottom and it comes out of the front of the nozzle. And then there's a striker and you light it and a little flame shoots out about this long. And you can use that flame to see in the dark. So the miners would clip these onto their helmet. Or before they had helmets, they would have just a boiled hard hat. Mm-hmm. And they would wear that and be able to see. Or they could clip it onto a belt or clip it onto a wall or something else. But this was the way that miners saw underground until the invention of the electric cap lamp in the late 19-teens, early 1920s.
Right, brought to you by Edison.
Brought to you by Edison, the permissible cap lamp. But really, when it comes to brightness, like comparison, these were about as bright as the cap lamps for a long time, up
Yeah.
until modern lights. And they actually still manufacture these in India, and they're still used in some places today. And you can still order a calcium carbonate online. And this one actually is fully functional.
It is fully functional, just not right now.
Yeah, it's not working right now.
That's okay.
Of course, when I go to make a video, it stops working. But, that's how it works.
Cool.
I can always blame Blue and the cats,
They're a bit distracting today. And next time we'll also talk about carbide writing, because I think that deserves its own segment of some of the cool the artwork and graffiti, if you want to call it that, and words that we've seen underground. We'll share that with you with the viewers as well, because it's a unique perspective that you don't see every day, and it's not something that people really know that exists in these old abandoned mines of artwork from.
Oh, it's totally
Artwork
lost.
from
I
miners.
rarely ever see it talked about. And it's something that's in many mines. They would take the lamps and actually use the soot from the front to write and carve their names and write dates and different things in mines, which is really cool.
Yep, we'll share some photos that we've taken over the years of that.
We have many. Well, thanks for joining us this week, and thanks for hosting, Crystal.
Thank you.
It's good talking about tariffs and hanging out with the cats while we do it. I don't know of many podcasts where they get together with cats and talk about tariffs and minerals. So
Well, maybe
it was a
next
good
time we'll
episode.
bring dogs and rocks.
Dogs and rocks, there we go. But never the cats and the dogs because they don't get along very well.
No, that wouldn't be fun. Cool.
Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and check out our next episode. And if you'd like to see the video that we made about rocks called Rock On, actually I think it's called Rock Solid, you can see the link below. Check it out. Thanks for watching.